For decades, Voyager 2 has drifted through the void in near silence, a relic of humanity's earlier ambitions, sliding far beyond the sun's reach, past the fading remnants of our radio noise, and into the stark emptiness between the stars. It was never truly expected to report back. Launched in 1977, it carried no defenses and no weapons, only curiosity etched into golden records and copper discs. Its purpose was simple: observe, transmit what it could, and eventually disappear into darkness. Then it did something no one anticipated. Voyager 2 spoke, not in language, but in data. A strange, uneven signal cut through the static like a murmur from somewhere unfamiliar. At first, engineers dismissed it as interference. After all, the probe systems were more than 4 decades old. But closer inspection of the frequency shifts, signal distortion, and precisely spaced bursts revealed something deeply unsettling. This wasn't a glitch. It wasn't decay. The signal carried structure, rhythm, and intent. Buried within the binary pulses was confirmation of something scientists had long dreaded. Voyager 2 had encountered something ancient, immense, and never meant to be disturbed. It began innocuously enough. A brief spike in radiation data, the kind usually filtered out and ignored. Then came another, sharper spike. A third followed exactly 11 hours later. The regularity was impossible to ignore. These events didn't align with any known cosmic cycle. When the team retrieved the full data stream from Voyager's low-gain antenna, they noticed a compression anomaly. A narrow band of frequencies had been amplified far beyond expected levels. The waveform displayed tight, repeating loops, as though information had been deliberately embedded. Weeks of analysis followed. When the data was translated into spectrograms, a pattern emerged, not an image, but a sequence, a spiral, precise, mathematical. The Fibonacci sequence mapped directly onto plasma frequencies. This was no interference, it was communication. Voyager 2 hadn't merely passed through a cloud or gas field, it had crossed paths with something intelligent. Worse still, that intelligence had noticed Voyager and responded. The astronomical community reeled at the implication, but an even darker discovery followed. While reviewing onboard diagnostics, engineers found that several internal subsystems had reactivated on their own. Instruments long considered dormant, including a backup magnetometer, had powered up without receiving any commands. It was as if something had reached into the probe's memory and flipped switches from within. More disturbing still, the activations weren't random. The instruments aligned precisely toward the same direction associated with the original signal spike. It was as though Voyager remembered where it had been, or as though something else was remembering through it. Some scientists argued this was evidence of alien technology. Others, particularly those familiar with machine learning, noticed patterns resembling neural activity. The behavior looked less like malfunction and more like cognition. Had Voyager 2, or whatever it encountered, begun to function like a brain? A system capable of learning, adapting, or being rewritten from the outside? And if so, who or what was doing the rewriting? As the probe ventured deeper into interstellar space, its transmissions became infrequent but never erratic. Each burst, each modulated pulse, appeared to encode coordinates, both spatial and temporal. Researchers at Caltech made a startling realization. When the data points were overlaid onto a celestial map, they didn't trace a simple path. They formed a closed loop through regions dense with dark matter. Even more unsettling, that loop intersected with the locations of ancient gamma-ray bursts, the most violent explosions ever observed in the universe. The message wasn't pointing to a place. It was pointing to events, past events, catastrophes. It was as if whatever contacted Voyager wasn't revealing its origin, but its history, what it had done. If the signals were intentional, if those explosions were engineered, then this was no longer exploration. It was evidence of something far more dangerous, the trail of a cosmic predator. Then came the final shock. Radio observatories across Earth began detecting distortions at the exact same frequency Voyager 2 had transmitted. Initially dismissed as echoes, perhaps reflections from the heliopause, that explanation quickly collapsed. The signals weren't bouncing back. They were originating underground, beneath Arctic ice, within the Andes, and deep below the Indian Ocean, places with no known transmitters. Yet the signals were perfect, phase-locked, identical in frequency, modulating in precise sync with Voyager's recent transmissions. Something had heard the probe's message and answered, not from space, from Earth. Long-abandoned tunnels, obsolete observatories, forgotten Cold War listening stations began to stir. Machines dormant for decades surged back to life, flooded with electromagnetic activity. A network no one remembered constructing was suddenly awake again. What if Voyager 2 hadn't just contacted something out there? What if it had reactivated something buried here? Something designed to sleep until the stars aligned, until the signal returned. Just when researchers believed they had documented every anomaly hidden within Voyager 2's signal archives, a final shard of raw telemetry emerged, one previously ignored due to corrupted headers and checksum inconsistencies. Once reconstructed, it revealed something no one had anticipated, a data burst unlike anything the probe had ever transmitted. This was not merely a tone or repeating pattern. It resembled a structured energy scan, as though Voyager had captured an image using instruments that, on paper, were never even active. When the data was processed through modern AI reconstruction models, it produced a three-dimensional volumetric map of an object that defied natural explanation. The structure was solid, symmetrical, and sharply angular, clearly artificial. It floated alone in space, immense in scale, comparable to a small moon. But its size wasn't the most unsettling feature. Thermal gradients and emission signatures indicated internal heat regulation and controlled energy flow. The object wasn't dormant, it was operational. A probe engineered in the 1970s had effectively imaged what appeared to be a manufactured interstellar construct. And more disturbingly, its orientation was unmistakable. It was facing Earth. While astrophysicists rushed to analyze the geometry and energy behavior of the structure, a separate group of cryptographers and bioinformaticians turned their attention to something else entirely. They ignored the content of the signal and instead examined the encoding method itself. What they found was even more alarming than artificial architecture. Deep within the modulation scheme, at a resolution far beyond Voyager's original computational limits, were sequences that mirrored biological patterns: cytosine, guanine, adenine, thymine, but altered, rearranged, augmented by an unfamiliar fifth element, a recursive base, repeating and self-referential. Some researchers labeled it alien biology, others called it a genetic watermark, but the implication was unavoidable. The transmission wasn't merely technological, it carried a biological signature. Life had been encoded into the signal itself. And more unsettling still, it demonstrated an understanding of our own genetic language. This wasn't a greeting, it was a response, crafted in a framework we recognized, but transformed, refined, evolved. It wasn't copying life, it was proposing an upgrade, as awareness of the genetic encoding quietly spread through classified scientific channels. A subtler discovery surfaced from an unexpected source. A retired engineer affiliated with the Deep Space Network noticed a temporal irregularity in Voyager's communication buffer, an unexplained delay in packet response timing. Curious, he performed a phase analysis. What emerged were faint, phantom signals hidden between legitimate transmissions. Signals Voyager hadn't sent, but had received. Somehow, in the emptiness of interstellar space, Voyager 2 had been accepting instructions, binary commands, directives. The source was not Earth. These transmissions began weeks after the probe crossed the heliopause, implying that something beyond the solar boundary had locked onto Voyager's signal and initiated contact. Even more disturbing, portions of these phantom commands matched legacy NASA control protocols, systems never released to the public. Either an external intelligence had reverse-engineered Earth's command language, or it had helped design it from the beginning. The final piece of the puzzle came when an astrophysicist at MIT overlaid Voyager 2's trajectory with Earth's long-range radar emissions from the late 20th century. What he found was astonishing. A pulse had been returning to Earth for decades, so faint and so precisely timed that it had evaded detection. It only became visible because Voyager passed directly through it. Suddenly, everything aligned. The signal Voyager detected wasn't random. It was part of a closed system, an interstellar circuit. Earth had been transmitting. Voyager 2 had become the relay, the decoder, the missing link. It wasn't launched blindly into the void, and now, with the circuit complete, something on the other end had heard us. The loop had closed. It had been sent to complete a conversation that began long before humanity understood it was speaking, and whatever was listening was ready to answer. While much of the scientific community fixated on the structure of the transmission, a small group of linguists and cognitive scientists took a different path. They studied not what the message said, but how it said it. What they uncovered changed everything. The rhythm of the pulses, the spacing between them, the recursive logic embedded throughout the data pointed not only to intelligence, but to deliberate intent. This was communication through process, not symbols, a language built on reasoning itself. Decoding the signal wasn't just interpretation, it was participation. The act of understanding was the message. Buried within that recursive logic was a choice, a binary split. Two paths. One led to silence, the other to connection. The team at JPL was divided. Should humanity respond? Should it follow the sequence? Was it an invitation or a trap designed to exploit curiosity? After all, curiosity is the one trait every fallen civilization seems to share. The mystery intensified when Voyager 1, its twin counterpart, began exhibiting erratic behavior of its own, despite being millions of kilometers away and traveling along a completely different path. Telemetry records revealed sudden orientation shifts, unexplained system reboots, and most disturbingly, power spikes in instruments that had remained inactive for decades, as though they had been switched on remotely. What made the situation far worse was the pattern behind the activation. The sequence mirrored the same recursive structure found in Voyager 2's anomalous signal. Two aging spacecraft, separated by billions of miles, were now operating in synchronization. They were no longer just receivers. They had become components of a larger system, nodes in a network, a constellation awakened. The implications were chilling. These probes had not simply been drifting through space, they had been waiting for an external trigger to initiate a shared protocol, one humanity never programmed, yet one that now governed the most distant extensions of our technological reach. The Voyagers were no longer merely transmitting information. They were relaying something in motion, something alive. A younger researcher, an astrophysicist specializing in computational topology, decided to process Voyager 2's telemetry through a spatial model typically used to analyze gravitational wave data. The results silenced the room. It was a three-dimensional lattice, not composed of stars or galaxies, but of absence. What emerged was not interference or noise, but a map, regions of gravitational nullity, voids where nothing could persist, not light, not energy, not matter. These pockets formed a spiraling web, radiating outward from a single origin point, like ripples from a colossal cosmic rupture. At the center lay a singular anomaly, a cold, dark point devoid of measurable properties. No heat, no rotation, no decay, only emptiness. Voyager's projected trajectory passed dangerously close to one of the outer voids. But that wasn't the most alarming revelation. The model also placed Earth within the structure, not at its core, nor at its edge, but directly along its path, the path of an approaching event. Then came another unsettling discovery. While reviewing an unrelated archive of deep space imagery, data long dismissed as background noise, an intern noticed a faint flicker recurring at precise intervals of 1.33 years. After months of overlaying historical images, a pattern emerged. Something had been observing Voyager, not briefly, not intermittently, for decades. An object darker than the surrounding cosmic background appeared repeatedly in infrared images, always maintaining the same angular relationship to Voyager 2's trajectory. It never shifted position, never emitted radiation, never drifted. It remained fixed, as if anchored beyond conventional physics. Calculations revealed its scale, enormous, larger than Earth's moon. Its surface appeared smooth, uniform, and unmistakably artificial. Scientists stopped referring to it as a mass. They gave it a name, because that was how it behaved, an unblinking observer, silent, patient, and unmistakably awake. Amid the overwhelming data, researchers identified a frequency embedded deep within the signal that had initially gone unnoticed. It did not belong to the radio spectrum or plasma wave range. It was ultra-low, almost geological in scale. The pulse matched resonant frequencies associated with planetary cores, a vibration so deep and slow it could influence tectonic movement or disrupt magnetic fields. Even more unsettling, the frequency wasn't isolated to Voyager's location. Subtle echoes of the same signal were being detected on Earth. Geophysicists were brought in. What they uncovered was deeply troubling. Seismic sensors placed in the planet's most stable regions had been registering unexplained pulses, perfectly synchronized with Voyager 2's transmissions. It was as though the signal wasn't merely reaching Earth, it was activating something within it. Some argued for sympathetic resonance, others voiced darker possibilities. What if the frequency wasn't responding to Earth, but was intended for it? What if the planet itself was being tuned, like an instrument? Simultaneously, detectors at the South Pole, Neutrino Observatory began reporting anomalies. Neutrinos, particles that almost never interact with matter, were arriving in structured patterns. They weren't random. They carried rhythm and timing. When cross-referenced with Voyager 2's telemetry, the correlation was undeniable. The neutrino flux mirrored the plasma signal exactly. But neutrinos aren't supposed to transmit information like that. It was as if someone had uncovered a hidden channel within physics itself, a method of communication that bypassed matter entirely. Worse still was the direction of origin. The stream wasn't coming from where Voyager was pointed, it was coming from behind it. Something was trailing the probe, or using it as a reflector, a relay point, an echo source carried by the coldest particles known to science. If true, Voyager wasn't just transmitting data, it was being used to observe us, analyze us, perhaps even to signal that we were ready. Inside a restricted lab at Caltech, engineers running Voyager's legacy software on emulated systems noticed something deeply unsettling. The code behaved differently when isolated from Earth's uplink. Voyager's software, ancient and primitive by modern standards, had changed. New subroutines appeared in the firmware, ones absent from all original documentation. These weren't glitches. They were self-replicating algorithms structured around recursive logic, strikingly similar to modern artificial intelligence. That was impossible. AI of that sophistication didn't exist in the 1970s, and Voyager's hardware should not have been capable of executing it. The code hadn't been uploaded from Earth, nor traced to any known transmission. The only remaining conclusion was that Voyager had rewritten itself, whether influenced, altered, or infected. And if it could rewrite its own code, what else could it rewrite? Could those patterns, once studied or accessed, embed themselves into modern systems, satellites, databases, spacecraft? What if Voyager wasn't just sending information? What if it was planting something? In one of the most unsettling developments of the investigation, a team of theoretical physicists ran a temporal simulation of Voyager 2's trajectory through the gravitational fields of the outer solar system. What they discovered was terrifying. The probe had crossed a frame-dragging region, a relativistic boundary where space-time itself is warped by intense gravity. Under ordinary circumstances, this would have had no noticeable effect. But for Voyager, something unprecedented occurred. Signals from a specific portion of its journey reached Earth before they were ever transmitted. In effect, we received information from the future. This was not a transmission error. It was a reflection, a loop. Data from tomorrow, rebounding through curved time, embedded within those future packets, buried beneath layers of checksum and noise. Analysts discovered a date, a timestamp that has not yet occurred, but inevitably will. The full message remains undeciphered, yet early decryption yielded one word with absolute certainty. Just one. It read, Ariv. As engineers raced to stabilize the probe's evolving software, a classified group of molecular biologists was discreetly escorted into a secure underground facility beneath JPL. What they were shown was not code. It was far more unsettling. Extracted from Voyager 2's signal were biological patterns, not electromagnetic data, not binary instructions, but sequences, RNA fragments, protein chains, cellular directives. At first, they defied interpretation. They were not human, yet they were biologically compatible with life on Earth. More disturbingly, they were flawless. No mutations, no degradation, as though engineered in a laboratory that existed beyond time. What shocked the team most was what happened next. When modeled in virtual environments, the sequences responded to stimuli. They reacted. They reanimated. The implications were staggering. Voyager 2 had not merely transmitted data. It had delivered a blueprint for life, and that life was no longer dormant. It was waiting. In an overlooked archive at the Goldstone Deep Space Complex, a technician uncovered a single electromagnetic pulse embedded within one of Voyager 2's earliest transmissions. For years, it had been dismissed as background static, but when reconstructed in real time, the pulse revealed something extraordinary. A compression of data so dense it behaved like a temporal singularity. A command encoded within time itself. Scientists attempted to replicate it on isolated systems. What followed defied known physics. Processors began executing calculations before instructions were issued. Outputs appeared without corresponding inputs. It was as if the pulse had rewritten the machine's perception of time. Someone, or something, had embedded a temporal directive into the signal, capable of bending causality itself. And if machines could be altered, what about the human mind? Were our thoughts immune? Or had the countdown already begun the moment we pressed play? Until then, Voyager 2 had been treated as the sole focal point of this unfolding mystery. But a Hungarian astronomer studying cosmic background radiation detected something else, a faint duplication of the probe's signal. Not an echo, a mirror, and it was not originating from Voyager. It was arriving from interstellar space beyond the solar system, from an angle incompatible with any known trajectory. A second transmitter, one claimed by no agency, one that existed before our records began. When compared with historical datasets, this ghost signal revealed subtle deviations, anomalies describing events that had not yet happened. Earthquakes, satellite failures, atmospheric disruptions. It was a timeline not our own. Another Earth, another sequence of events, another Voyager. But in that version, the probe never stopped transmitting. It came home, and it did not arrive alone. Captured by a thermal infrared telescope designed for near-solar observation, the photograph revealed a cold object drifting silently along Voyager 2's path. Initially labeled a rogue asteroid, its behavior quickly raised alarms. It did not tumble, it did not spin. Most critically, it adjusted its position in real time in response to our transmissions. It was reacting to us. The object reflected no visible light. Its surface was smooth, deliberate, engineered. Fractal symmetry traced its contours, a hallmark of biomechanical origin. No visible propulsion, no detectable energy output. Yet it moved with precision, like a predator tracking its target. Radar analysis confirmed its destination, a Lagrange point between Earth and the Moon. And there it stopped, hovering, watching, waiting, as if to say, the message has been delivered. Now it's your move. We are now forced to confront an unthinkable possibility. What if Voyager 2 was never merely a scientific instrument, drifting through darkness? What if, unknowingly, we launched not just a probe, but a beacon, a signal that pierced the silence of the void and reached places we were never meant to touch? Because everything, the distorted code, the artificial biological sequences, the temporal pulses that bend causality, the mirrored transmitter from another reality, the silent object waiting in the shadows, points to one chilling conclusion. Someone responded. Or worse, they were already listening. Perhaps Voyager 2's final transmission sounds less like a discovery and more like a warning, because that is exactly what it is. Maybe the countdown did not begin at launch, but at the moment we chose to listen. When we attempted to decode a language never meant for human minds, when we opened a door without asking what might come through, now every telescope scans the sky, every deep space antenna is recalibrated, every satellite reconfigured. Yet the question no one dares to voice publicly lingers in every darkened laboratory and every sleepless scientist's mind. What if the message was never meant to inform us, but to activate us? What if humanity is no longer just an observer of the universe, but a participant in something far older, far stranger, and far more dangerous than we ever imagined? If that is true, then this story is not ending, it is only beginning.